What do we have here? How are these four things similar or different? You might say they're all alive. They all have blue backgrounds. They all appear to be maybe jumping or flying, something with that same kind of position. Some of the things I just said make sense, others not so much. But we can compare living things to establish relationships. Obviously, as you can see at the top, that's classification. It's the last thing we're doing this year. Happy Tuesday, bio students. The end is nigh. Classification is when we put things into groups of common features. We need to do this because there is thankfully still a huge amount of biodiversity in nature. We really like to keep it there because it's a very, very good thing and something we definitely want to maintain. If we want to classify some of the organisms in this picture, we could say that these are animals. Of those animals, we can break it down maybe a little bit further and identify reptiles versus insects versus amphibians. We could look maybe for all the plants. We can compare things that are orange or purple. There are lots of ways to compare and group things, mostly limited just really by our imagination. Why do we care though? Why should we bother to classify anything? There's a couple of reasons here. Classification can make it easy to identify things. It creates order from disorder and helps us to learn, know what's around us. It tells us about the world. It helps establish relationships that could be helpful or keep us safe. Think of, say, discovering medicines. We can find some plants, say, okay, well, this plant helps us with this, and this drug comes from this thing in nature. It's very, very helpful for us. So, for example, here's 4 pictures. Which one of these pictures shows poison ivy? Given a situation where eating the wrong plant out of a few similar looking ones is the difference between life and death, how are you most likely to stay alive? That's why we classify and identify things. That's something that's been very, very helpful in basically the entire history of people. Science of classifying things based on observations and descriptions allowing us to give names and identities is called taxonomy. Different groupings that we can make up are called taxa, and these are based on characteristics that can be used to separate and distinguish any number of organisms. And like I said before, it's basically just as limited as our imagination is. You can organize by size or shape or color or whatever. Really, any number of categories you come up with. You can always group them into some kind of system. This right here is Mr. John Arbuckle, and this is Odie. Hopefully you knew that already. Can we compare them? Do they have anything in common? Probably more than you think, actually. We could say they're both animals. That's the kingdom Animalia. They're both grouped into the phylum Chordata. That means they have spinal cords, the chordates. They are both mammals, right? They both are born live from their mothers. At that point, they both diverge a little bit. John's a primate and a hominid, and Odie then is a carnivorous canine. John, a human, is classified as a Homo sapiens sapiens, and Odie is a dog, so a Canis lupus familiaris. That's their scientific names with the 3 little terms at the bottom there. The person who came up with this system of classification was named Charles Linnaeus. He suggested the use of what's called binomial nomenclature. So binomial meaning 2 parts, nomenclature because we're naming things. Instead of having to go through the whole system of classification that we just saw, so instead of having to say some individual organism is an animal and a chordate and a canine and all this stuff down, we can just say the genus and species and it's enough information. The other information at higher levels of classification won't change, so we can always just look it up. Right? With Odie and John, they had the same couple things in common up top. They were animals. They were, now I'm gonna forget, chordata. They were mammals. That stuff's all gonna be the same. At some point, they will get different, but the things they have in common, we don't really care about. We just want to kind of zoom in, cut to the chase at the very end, and that's the important stuff. That's what we call the scientific name. And that's really just saying the genus and the species. So of those 7 categories, sometimes you see it as 8 categories. The last 2, genus and species, that's the thing we want to focus on. Because we can then go to any kind of book and look up, well, if it's Homo sapiens, if it's Canis lupus, what were the other things they had in common before? Scientific name is the really important one that cuts right to the chase and says, this is the organism type you're talking about. I don't know about you, but I think that makes just things so much easier on us, right? If we wanted to say someone's a person, we don't have to say, oh, well, this individual was Animalia, Chordata, Mammalia, Primate, Hominidae, Homo sapiens. We can just cut right to the chase, like I said, and go right down to the important stuff and say, oh yeah, they're Homo sapiens. That much simpler. So these 8 categories are domain. That's the one you don't always hear about. Domain's kind of a higher level one. You don't always have mentioned. It's sometimes out there. The ones you should expect to see, though, if you ever see these classification systems, are kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Again, genus and species are the two that we kind of use to sum up everything, and that's what's your scientific name. So Homo sapiens for human beings, Homo is the genus, species is the sapiens part, or sapiens are the species rather. So if you ever hear of like kind of cavemen type organisms, like Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, those are man-like species that aren't around anymore. We are in the same kind of similar branches of the genetic evolutionary tree. So we are all the Homo genus, it's just we are a different species. Same thing, you have all these different cats that are Panthera genus, different dog-like canine kind of animals that are of the Canis genus. I do want to mention this little chart here. Again, genus, species, the important ones. I almost flipped past before I said this, so let me check my notes here. So on the domain and kingdom levels, there's all these different animals. You see up here, like the kind of far outer rings. There's lots of stuff, right? These outer rings are really, really packed in pretty tightly. Lots of different animals here, different organisms, and they get more narrow as you move in because you start just really bumping things off. You ever play that game, Guess Who? You say, well, does your person have a hat? You can usually eliminate all but one or two characters. You say, does your person have a hat? If you say, is your person male or female, you eliminate fewer options. Same thing if you play like a 20 questions type game. You're eliminating fewer choices at a time. Eventually, you get all the way down to one organism. I think in this one, it was the gray squirrel. You have the eastern gray squirrel. You can say, well, it's a mammal, it's a whatever. It goes all through these little systems, down and down, down, and each time we're losing lots of things. You lose the birds, you lose the reptiles, you lose the insects, you get to the mammals, you get to these smaller mammals, you get to the things that are all different types of squirrels, and finally, it's just, of these couple of options, it's the one single squirrel right in the middle, and that's your answer right there, the eastern gray squirrel. That's really how it works for every living thing that you can classify in this kind of way. This is a very important tip, something you really want to keep in mind if you're ever out in the world. It's really important to be able to classify these individuals and really know who you're talking to, what's going on. So definitely keep this little tidbit in mind. Now, traditionally, we've classified things by physical features we can actually see. That was easy, right? Especially way back in time when we really didn't have modern technologies, even microscopes or things like that. Nowadays, we're able to do a lot better. With the combination of fossil records and genetic testing, which we've seen at various times during the year, the science of phylogeny lets us establish really pretty good evolutionary relationships. Not just, well, I think this is a type of dog, but really kind of establishing where that whole lineage of dogs came from. Just like we had pedigrees, where you may see a family tree of your relatives, we can also make what are called phylogenetic trees to show how living things change and evolve over time. Or they could also just stay the same or go extinct. So in this picture here, on this phylogenetic tree, we have this one organism down here, organism A, and it kind of branched off and some kind of mutation became organism E, and another one kept going this way and became B. Now, you could see B then eventually branched off again and became C and D, and they all kind of branched off themselves and evolved a little bit more, while E went for a long period of time without changing at all. And eventually, just now when you get to the present day, E has evolved to become this organism G. So you can see kind of as time goes on, some things change a lot, like this constant kind of shuffling between B to D and then D to J and D to H, where A went for a pretty good amount of time right here before actually becoming E, and E went for a pretty good amount of time until some amount of evolution happened, and you got now this final organism G up here. But that's how a phylogenetic tree works, and much like with all the DNA stuff we've seen, the more branches you have in common, the closer you are. So, I and C are pretty closely related up here. Organism F over here is really not related at all to organism G. Way, way, way back in time, they had this common ancestor, organism A, but that's really it. This would be like you and some really, really distant cousin, where maybe F and I would be like first cousins or even siblings. So same kind of principles as a pedigree or a regular family tree here. Okay, one more for good measure here. So let's classify these animals here. At the very top, we've got all these animals here: grizzly bear, black bear, giant panda, red fox, Abert squirrel. I'm going to put a little L right there and pretend that this squirrel's name is Albert, because that's cool. I think I like that. It entertains me. Coral snake or a sea star. These are all animals, right? That's pretty much all they have in common. They're in the same kingdom. They're all animals. That's it, though. There's a lot of very different types of animals. Then maybe we can say, okay, these are going to be the chordata phylums. That's, again, things that have sort of a spinal cord with a nerve cord. So we eliminate the sea star. That's a very, very simple animal. It counts as an animal, but it's not really very particularly well developed and advanced. So we knocked it off now. Now we say, okay, how about all the animals that are only what? Who do we get rid of here? We got rid of the reptile, right? Get rid of the snake. So this now is going to be all the mammals, the class Mammalia. Everybody else is out. Next one, what do these things have in common? Who do we get rid of? We got rid of the squirrel. That was that guy from before. We saw the squirrel in the last little picture I showed you. So these now are going to be the carnivora, the carnivores, the meat eaters. So we get rid of the squirrel. It's not a meat eater. And now we're just left with the grizzly bear, the black bear, the giant panda, and the red fox. Next one looks like we get rid of red fox. Now it's the Ursidae. Those are the bears. So it's the grizzly bear, black bear, the giant pandas. We got rid of the fox, and now we're just looking at the bearish family. Now the next one, unfortunately, the panda has to leave us too, which let's try to stop down in the real world. We don't lose the panda anytime soon, but we're left with just the grizzly and black bears because this is now the Ursus genus. That's the really kind of more specific, this type of bear, what you probably think of as a bear, where the pandas are kind of like the fancy bears, right? And the last one is now the species. It's Ursus arctos. So for species, really, you typically see the genus written kind of a second time, but this is its scientific name now, Ursus arctos. And that's the grizzly bear. That would be levels of classification instead of saying, oh, this is Animalia, Chordata, Mammalia, Carnivora, Ursidae, Ursus, Ursus arctos. No. Go right to the end of the story, say Ursus arctos. Anybody who wants to know all the rest of it, is it a mammal, is it a carnivore, whatever, they can go look that up for themselves. Let them waste time. Just use a scientific name, say Ursus arctos. Now everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. These things all look pretty similar, right? A bunch of frogs, a lot of them green. Back to that question I asked a couple minutes ago, though. What if you're lost in the middle of nowhere and need to eat to survive? Maybe one of these frogs is delicious, but the other 8 will kill you inside of 5 minutes. Anybody willing to take a chance? Who's hungry? To make sense of these things, we can use what's called a dichotomous key. Simply put, dichotomous keys are just a tool for figuring out what the heck we're looking at. Dichotomous is like the word dichotomy, meaning a choice between two things, and that's exactly how this works. A dichotomous key is going to be like one of those choose your own adventure books that I always hated. If you want to go into the big haunted looking house, all the blood curdling screams coming out of it, go to page 7. Or if you want to keep just walking home and doing something else, go to page 400. Well, gee, I wonder which one I should be choosing here. The thing about dichotomous keys is that you always need to go in order, starting from step 1. Start at step 1, then go through the steps in order until you're told to do something else or you get to your answer. If you don't do that, there's nothing I can do for you. You can't start in the middle of the list and try to make any sense of it. You don't start in the middle of a book, hopefully. You don't start at the middle of this dichotomous key list. If you've ever gone to nature and have the little guidebooks or anything like that, you know exactly how this works. Just go step by step. If it's this, it's not that. And then same thing with the picture before. Is it a what did it start with? Is it a mammal? Well, we knew that it wasn't a reptile. It's an animal. That's a mammal. That's this. And you just kind of knock your choices off as you go. Don't look at the picture of what this bird looks like here and then try to randomly find it in step 5, 6, or 7 on your list. Start at step 1. You'll have a choice. Do whatever it says. Go to step 2, or maybe go to step 3, or maybe go to step 17. Whatever it tells you to do, do that in order. So we've got 4 birds here. W, X, Y, and Z. At least 1 or 2 of these are examples of Darwin's finches from the Galapagos. So we're going to figure out which is which here. To do that, we're going to start at the beginning because I just told you about 9 times that's how we do it. So we're going to start with step A right here. And why don't we start with bird Y? We could go in order with bird W, but having done this to get the answers, I know it's just going to make our lives easier if we go to with bird Y. If you do try to do this in any kind of order and say, oh, I'm not really sure about which bird is which, it could be either this. That's fine. Go do something else and then come back to it. Go find something maybe a little more obvious and then come back and the answers will eliminate themselves as you go. So I'm going to start with bird Y. Now our options for step number 1 say either A, the beak is relatively long and slender, or B, the beak is relatively stout and heavy. I don't know. I mean, you've got 2 beaks I would definitely describe as stout and heavy. Long and slender, beak on bird W over here is definitely longer, but it's pretty heavy looking. It's not really slender. So I'm going to say that this kind of thinner looking beak right here is pretty long and slender. It says relatively long and slender. That's the other thing. So right away, it tells us, okay, great. That bird is Certhidae, probably pronounced Certidae or something like that. So I'm going to write that right up top. Right off the bat, we've got 1 bird down. It's the only bird that has that kind of shaped beak, Certhidea. Oh, Certhidea, okay, not Certhidae. So right there, we got this bird. We're done. What should we do next? Let's go to bird X here. I'll start with go next to this guy. We're going right back to step 1 again. It's either going to be a beak that's relatively long and slender. We know it's not because we just pointed that one out as being the other guy, or it's relatively stout and heavy. That makes sense. It's kind of a short beak here. It's kind of fatter, a little rounder beak. So it's the stout and heavy beak. That tells us to go on to step 2. So we're going to do that. On step 2, we have either choice A, the bottom surface of the lower beak. So that's this, the bottom surface of the lower beak. right there, and it says it's either flat and straight, sure doesn't look flat or straight, or it's going to be curved. Well, it clearly is curved, so now we're going to go on to step 3. We're not done yet. Step 3 says either A, the lower edge of the upper beak, so this right here is the lower edge of the upper beak, it basically just means the middle, has a distinct bend, or it's mostly flat. And I just drew this line, sure looks mostly flat to me, so that means that bird X is what's called platyspiza. Platyspiza with a Y. All right, 2 birds down. I'm going to cross that bird off. Let me get rid of these circles here. Go back to my red ink. Platyspiza, done. 2 more left. Let's go to bird X because he looks a little bit like, bird Z because he looks a little bit like bird X. We just got that out of the way. Back to step 1. We know it's not A because that was the other bird. So the beak is relatively stout and heavy. We're going to go on to step 2 rather. Either the bottom surface of the lower beak is flat and straight or curved. The bottom surface of the lower beak is definitely curved. You can see here it has that curved shape to it. So we're going to go to step 3. And for step 3, it says either the lower edge of the upper beak has a distinct bend or it's mostly flat. We just did the one that was mostly flat, and we can see definitely right here that the bottom edge of the upper beak has that little bend to it. So this now is going to be Camarhynchus. So let me write right here. Camarhynchus. And we could go through the rest of them, but we've done 3 over 4 options, which means our big guy over on the side is Geospiza. And that is one of the most common of Darwin's finches. That's a very common one, if I remember correctly, from when I was in high school and I read that book about the finches that I mentioned the other day. There was Geospiza magnirostrus and conorostris and all these other ones with weird bird names. I don't know why I remember that this many years later, but for some reason it sticks in my mind. Let's move on. That's it. We're done. Giving you 1 lab to do as your final homework. I know I said we were done with everything but forms, but I don't really see any way to get around that because I do have a lab I'd like you to do, and honestly the forms questions just don't really exist. There's really no multiple choice questions for this kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you a lab that it's going to be due on Monday. I know I said Friday was the last day. That's supposed to be the last day, but I figure everything else is going to be due that day for all your classes probably. So a couple extra days, you get it done by Friday, great. If not, you've got until Monday night to get everything done. So I'll show you how to do that on the next slide, and then we'll wrap it up. All right, so we're going to do a dichotomous key lab. So we're going to identify sharks. So we just went through these steps of the bird beaks and all that stuff. Remember, you're always starting at step 1 and just working forward. Always start the same place right at the beginning and just go through step by step. It's going to get tedious because you're going to always be starting the same place. You're going to get boring. You're going to get used to it, but just always do that. Otherwise, you're not going to make a clue what you're doing here. So on the front of your lab, you're going to see a picture like this. It's a nice little shark diagram, and it shows you a general outline of the shark body structure. Notice this term right here, the dorsal fins are going to be the ones on kind of the shark's back. So you have the first dorsal fin and then a second dorsal fin. You might have a couple. You might have only 1. You could have 3 or 4. It varies as the shark bodies go. Notice you'll see back here the caudal fins are the big ones in the back. The anal fins are the ones kind of underneath here. The pelvic fin is one sort of on the bottom, sort of midway down the body. The pectoral fin is the one that's probably you think of as more of a flipper, like in the position that our hands would, or our arms would be. A couple of other terms here. It tells us that the dorsal side is the top of the shark's body and the ventral side is the bottom of the shark's body. So you got to pay really close attention to this picture. Always refer to that. It'll show you how everything works. And of course, here we've got the gill slits to show how many. I think it's 4 or 5 depending on what the kind of shark is, and that'll help you go through there. So we'll look at pictures like this. These are, I think there's 15 of them. These are a number of the different sharks. You see numbers 1, 2, 3 all around. A couple look kind of like this guy right here, where it says top view. There's 3 of them. There's one will be right kind of down here in the picture, and then there's another one that's all the way down the bottom left corner. It says the top view. These are like manta ray type things. It's looking down on top of it, and that's going to come up right in our first question. So I'll show you how to do that. Just an example. Let me cross this off here, get rid of that ink, and starting as always, right the first part of our key. It says for step 1, either the shark has a body that's kite-like if viewed from the top. So think of what a kite looks like if you're flying a kite, right? You got your little, it's not a bad kite, right? if you're flying your kite, it's going to have that kind of diamond shaped, square shaped, whatever you want to call it, kind of triangular-ish, sort of symmetrical looking body from above. So either the body is kite-like if viewed from the top, which again tells you the top view, so that's where you're going to actually refer to this, or body is not kite-like. So if it is a kite-like body, you'd go to step 12. If it's not kite-like, you go to step 2. So for most of these sharks that look like what we think sharks look like, they look like big fish, you go to step 2 because these are not kite-like. You are not shown what the animal looks like from above. With the couple that tell you top view, it's from above, that's telling you that's the kite-like one. So you're going to have to go to step 12 right here. So for this one and the other two like it, you would go down to the bottom of the page, you'd skip all the middle steps and go down to step 12. And for this step, you're going to look at it, and it says your two choices of step 12 are either it has a small dorsal fin present near the tip of the tail, or there is no dorsal fin present near the tip of the tail. So if there is a small dorsal fin, you'll actually stop right there. It tells you that's the skate family of sharks. And if there is no dorsal fin, you'll go on now to the next one in step 13. So I'm just going to erase what I drew here on the picture so we can see what a dorsal fin is, because right on top here, it says dorsal side is the kind of top, the back part of the shark. So we're looking for a small dorsal fin. That means we're looking for a small fin on kind of the back top side of the shark here, of this little manta ray looking thing. And what do you see here? Here's your body. So here's the eyes up here in the front. This is the back of it. And now the tail goes down here. This part here that looks like it's kind of a weird fold, that is a fin. So it's just sort of folded over. It's like if you have your hand, up on the desk and your thumb's facing upward, pointing upward, it's sticking out of the picture. So these two things right here are actually little fins sticking kind of up, coming out of the picture, sticking up in the air. So that is a small dorsal fin right there. So that would be present. So the small dorsal fin is present. We're good for that. And that means that this animal right there, number 1, is going to be the skate shark. So that doesn't really look like a shark, but it counts as a shark by whatever criteria and classification tools they would have used to describe sharks. We didn't learn specifics of these things. We saw the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species list, but however it matters and however it counts, this thing counts as a type of shark. So you do start at number 1. In this case, it tells you to go all the way to 12, and right there you're done. If there was no dorsal fin, then you'd go to step 13, and that would show somewhere else. And you can see right here, it actually says manta ray is one of the ones in step 13. So somewhere on your picture will be a manta ray, one of your shark pictures. Okay, so go right now, finish the form. It's probably going to be 2 or 3 questions. I have to go finish that myself right now, but without any of these dichotomous key questions because they're on the lab. And then that form and the shark lab I just showed you how to do are all going to be due again on Monday. Again, Friday is supposed to be the last day, but you've got a couple extra days. I'll check at the end of the week anything that's done. I'll find that. Otherwise, I'll go through and check it early next week. On Friday now, I will be posting up a year-end survey that's going to also be due Monday. This is an important thing to do. So if you have done anything at all while we were home, also do this. Make sure you do this. This is the really important one. We have no idea at this point what school is going to look like in September, what percentage of school may or may not be remote learning, and it's really important for us to know what works and what doesn't. So I don't even know what's going to be on this survey yet. I have to see what kind of questions I'm interested in, but we need to know what's been working for you and what's not. Especially now as bio students ending bio. You're going to chem next year, and that's difficult enough as it is. We need to make it as approachable as possible for you. So you got to help us know how we can actually change things up. So make sure you please get this thing done. It's also going to be due Monday, as I said, and then that'll hopefully help all of us in the science department help you better next year. Extra help Thursday. So if you're watching this on Tuesday or Wednesday, extra help on Thursday at noon. We would have already had extra help on Tuesday at noon. Office hours also Monday at 10 a.m. And then next week, the last meeting of the year, because school officially ends on Wednesday, I'll be having this time a WebEx meeting, so not on Teams. So I'll send out at some point later this week a link to my WebEx page, room, whatever you want to call it, Tuesday at noon for all my classes. So that thing can hold, 100 and something people. Maybe I'll do more than 1 or 2, which was the typical number this time. Final meeting of the year, I'll post up a little end of the year message myself, but if you want to come and drop by and say hi and by at the same time, please feel free to do that. Any questions, let me know. I'll talk to you all in a couple days.